that one. And in 3, 2, 1. Bingo. We are live. It's been a while. February 15th, 16th, whatever the hell it is. Anyways, it's been almost a month. And we've got a really good episode for you on anti-materialism, the spiritualist assumption. That's what we're all about today. Okay, so some folks, how about most folks, just don't like the idea of materialism. There must be something more. Many feel that way. And it is non-material, made of the spirit, in the spiritual realm, something beyond, right? More essential, of greater worth and potency and mystery and wonder than just mere matter. This yearning, this unsatisfied perspective seems to creep into the discourse on damn near anything. Evolution, consciousness, morality, creativity, right? In addition to the more strict definition of spiritualism as a belief in the souls of the dead existing in some spiritual realm somewhere, and the communication was same, right? The Oxford Online Dictionary also adds this: the doctrine that the spirit exists as distinct from matter, or that spirit is the only real reality. A lot of data I'm going to throw at you today is going to be drawn from an AP Associated Press news article from the NORC Center for Public Affairs. I had to look at 12 websites. Finally, the Wikipedia. Nothing on AP defined NORC, NORC. National Opinion Resource Center, which I guess has been around for 50, 60, 70 years. But anyways, here's the U.S. numbers. And they're a little more updated from a post I'm going to link to. The nuns, or no religious affiliation, was about 3% in the early 60s. Very, very few people would say they aren't religious in the United States. Okay, 97% of us said, yeah, I'm Catholic, I'm this, I'm that, right? By late 2023, late last year, 30% of the U.S. population now identifies as no particular religious affiliation. Doesn't mean they don't believe in God, doesn't mean they're not spiritual in some sense, but they have thrown out religions, okay? Atheists and agnostics make up a little less than a half of the nuns. Most nuns are spiritual in some way, just not religious, and believe in some sort of God or higher power or whatever that may be, okay? So 43% of the Gen Z 8 to 29-year-olds identify as no religious affiliation. And I've seen other polls put it at 48, 49%. It's damn near half. So 50% of the young people, like the people I teach at school, without me even being a secular activist dumping my stuff on them, they're already there. Half of them are already non-religious, and many of them that are still identifying with religious aren't very, their religiosity is low. They're not practicing. They're not very involved, right? So see my episode number 9 here on the Unbelieving Scum YouTube channel. Way to go, Gen Z. Episode 9 gets into that in kind of detail, a little more than we will here today. So here's the nuns by generation. The silent generation, which are now the 80-year-olds and over, about 18% of them will identify as not religious. The boomers, now that's me, 60s and 70-year-olds, about 26% of us now identify as non-religious. Gen X, the 40 and 50-year-olds, 35%. The millennials, right, that are now, pushing 30 to 40, about 44%. And the Gen Z kids, like I said, most of my students, 48%, right? Just about 50% of them are not religious. And whether it's 43 or 48 in one poll over NOR, the point is that I'm trying to make here is Even the majority of nuns in each generation is close to 60% who are spiritual in some kind of way and believe in some sort of God and with it a spiritual realm. And it comes in a multitude of different versions, right? The AP article samples some of the ideas and some very typical comments, which we'll discuss throughout this lecture here. Most people, even in the modern world of scientific knowledge, tend to believe there's something beyond mere matter. It's just there. It has to be, right? And many get downright defensive about it, whatever form of transcendence that they assume or ascribe to or claim, right? And often demand that it's there. It's there and it's real. Science can't touch it, can't discover it. It's beyond science and material investigation. It has some special ontological or metaphysical status that is assumed, which is philosophical bullshit we're not going to get into. So here's a typical quote from the AP News article, the Nork article. I'm pretty into astrology. I've got my crystals charging up in the window right now. Honestly, I'll bet half of it is a total placebo. Good surmise. But I just like the idea that things in life can be explained by greater forces, said some Missouri college student. Just like religious claims, it's like deep down they know it's bullshit, but it feels right, it seems right. And it's fun, or funner, right, than bleak materialism, which isn't at all bleak in the least, but it's the common perception right now. I like the idea that life is explained by greater forces. That lady's not alone. Most feel that way. Well, why, right? Well, I'm going to try and throw my 2 cents on all this. I think it's so entrenched in our modern culture, okay? 2,000, 3,000 years of spiritual thinking. It just seems right. Just like everyone used to believe in unicorns and werewolves and evil eye and comets and portended disaster, people still believe, well, there must be a heaven and hell, or at least a spiritual realm where spirits go and there's souls and there's something after death, and this spiritual realm is out there somewhere, and it's somehow better or more real. Okay? All kinds of people make claims like that, but just like with religion, I go, well, how would we know if the Deepak Chopras of this world, or the Dalai Lama, for example, had the right idea about the spiritual realm, that there is a universal consciousness that is the ultimate non-material essence, right? Or for the Lama, that there are additionally enlightened bodhisattvas who have reached nirvana and successfully jettisoned their corporeal form and are off floating as disembodied free souls in some celestial realm. What if the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists have got it right? Could it be instead that the Pope and his minions have got the spiritual scene down right, which includes the Old Testament, God in his Trinity, along with JC and the Holy Ghost, along with all the saints up there with St. Peter in heaven, right, guarding the pearly gates, is the Christian description of the spiritual realm and its denizens the correct one? Maybe it's the stern-faced mullahs of Islam that have got it right, and it's Allah in his paradise and his hell that are the real things, and the New Age Chopra followers, the traditional Buddhists, the Christians, the Jews, the Hindus, everybody else who isn't Muslim just has it all wrong. They're deluded, and what's really out there for Muslims is Allah, period, okay, and Muhammad is his prophet, and there ain't nothing else, okay? How would you know if any of them are right? And here's the upshot for me. It all sounds like mystical bullshit to me. God without religion, right? Like I said, 43% of all nuns profess belief in a God or a higher power. 79% overall of U.S. adults professed faith in God. And even the nuns that don't believe in God probably lean towards something spiritual, non-material, in some form, right? Great quote. I'm not throwing in the towel on everything, she said. I still believe in a higher consciousness. Again, some higher plane of spiritual existence that we somehow all tap into. And it's such a typical response. Why? Well, I think it's just an ingrained part of our religion, infused modern culture. 2,000, 3,000 years of indoctrination into the Abrahamic or reincarnation religions that, uh, you know, uh, two-thirds of the world believe in those top four religions: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism, right? And that leaves us with that everybody knows that feeling and sensibility that, of course, there's a spiritual realm of some kind. That's my spin on it. It's not the only spin, but it's the main one we're going to talk about today. And it is slowly eroding. It might take a few more decades or of all our recent modern knowledge, right? Maybe a century or two to discard unquestioned ideas from the infancy of our species, right? That are mere habits of explanation. It's definitely eroding. You know, the figures on the nuns I just gave you in the traditionally religious U.S. are staggering. It may take a while to let these tendencies fade to the background. From the wiki, spiritualism is a metaphysical belief that the world is made up of at least two fundamental substances, matter and spirit. This very broad metaphysical distinction is further developed into many and various forms by the inclusion of details about what spiritual entities exist, such as a soul, the afterlife, spirits of the dead, deities, mediums, as well as details about the nature of the relationship between spirit and matter. It may also refer to the philosophy, doctrine, or religion pertaining to a spiritual aspect of existence. That's the wiki. The amount and diversity of spiritual claims from the world's religions and philosophies knows no bounds. Does anybody believe in Zeus anymore? How about Isis and Osiris? Why not? Because nobody teaches to them as actual real beings anymore. And it is that way for most of the 8 billion on the planet. They don't believe in Zeus or Isis or Osiris. Why not? Those were the main deities for about 1,000 years. Egyptian religion ran over 3,000 years, longer than any religion on the planet, and it's gone. All the spiritual panoply of gods that the Egyptians had, rivaling the Hindus, nobody believes in it anymore. Why not? Right? No one believes in these old mythological deities. They are acknowledged as fantasies from the past because they never showed up, and nobody is taught to believe them in anymore. And for 6 billion of the 8 billion humans on the planet, they are not taught nor believe in Jesus, right? There's only 2 billion Christians on the planet. There's 6 billion people that don't give a hang about the Bible, Jesus, Yahweh, none of it, Holy Spirit. 2/3 of humanity. The vast majority do not believe in JC and the Trinity, okay, just like all us humans don't believe in Zeus, Osiris, and Isis, right? Why? No gods, no ghosts, no spiritual entities of ever kind ever proposed have ever showed up. No spiritual realms of the hundreds, thousands ever proposed throughout history have ever been discovered somewhere, anywhere. That's my take on it. And that's why we're losing this assumption that there's something out there. It's never showed up. None of the claims from it have ever turned out. But people still love to say science can't know. It can't discover everything. It is not the only way of knowing. There's a realm beyond that science just can't touch. A whole existence, right? Beyond mere matter that science won't ever explain. Everybody knows that. My reply is, nobody knows that. So let's take an everybody knows that. Let's take it from the 1600s, and I borrowed this from David Wooten's The Invention of Science, phenomenal book. A well-educated European believed and knew as common knowledge that everybody else believed that witches exist and can summon storms at sea to sink ships. Absolutely. Werewolves, there weren't any in England, but they were definitely on the continent, right? They existed, absolutely. Circe turned Odysseus' crew into pigs. That wasn't myth. It was a real story. It happened. Mice spontaneously generate from piles of straw. Everybody knew that. Put a pile of straw and, old rags in the corner of your house. You're going to have mice. That's where they come from. Maggots spontaneously generate from old meat. Astrologers, unicorns, demons were common. Dreams predicted the future. The earth stood still and the sun was going around it. God made the shape and color of all plants so you could tell its medicinal use. Base metals could be turned into gold. The alchemists just haven't discovered the trick yet. And the sky was full of omens, comets, portended evil. That's what everybody knew in the 1600s. By 1750, mid-18th century, 150 years later, all that common knowledge, the everybody knows that stuff, everybody knows it, disappeared. First in England, and later on it, spread to the rest of the continent and around the world. An educated Englander in the 18th century didn't know anybody who was educated who still believed in witches or werewolves or magic or alchemy or astrology. Just 150 years and all that, oh, everybody knows it, gone. That educated Englishman has used or owned a telescope or a microscope. Homer's Odyssey is fiction. His crew didn't get turned into pigs any more than Jesus turned pigs into, anyways. And unicorns are imaginary. Creatures are not spontaneously generated. Mice don't come from rags. Maggots don't come from rotten meat. We actually had microscopes that started figuring out, flies lay eggs in the rotten meat and the maggots crawl out. And, same thing happens with mice. Murdered bodies don't bleed in the presence of a murderer. That was a classic. The earth goes around the sun. Rainbows are from refracted light, not a sign from God. Comets don't portend anything. There's nothing to fear. And they really are a celestial wonder. They're cool to watch. The heart is a pump. Miracles don't happen. So that's 150 years later, all that common knowledge just went poof. And modern knowledge has outstripped most of ancient myth. But I'll wager, like Newton in the 1600s, the educated 18th century Englishman who didn't believe in werewolves, witches, and all that other stuff anymore, I bet she still believed in God, the Bible, souls, heaven and hell, right? Angels, and probably the devil, okay? Only now that stuff is really getting jettisoned. It seems there's a formidable appeal to the idea of metaphysical transcendence, that one is a part of some ultimate reality, and, excuse me, and I wonder how much of that is left over from negative religious perspective, that this world is somehow crass and meaningless, mundane, and that the afterlife and the spiritual realm is the true purpose, the ultimate goal and meaning given in heavenly paradise, ethereal bliss, its perfection, its completeness, right? The realm of the heavens, the realm of God. Once again, this idea of metaphysical transcendence sounds more to me like complete bullshit that we have been taught is the ultimate reality. And despite these yearnings and claims, from Deepak Chopra-like New Agers to the spiritual hierarchies of the world's religions, there is as yet no evidence that any of these ideas actually exist. No gods ever showed up, no spiritual realms, no heavens, no hells have ever been found. I suggest spiritualism hangs around as an unquestioned given, just like in the 1600s, werewolves and witches were an unquestioned given. Well, despite there being absolutely no evidence for ghosts, heavens, hells, gods, angels, devils, non-material consciousness, pan-psychic universal conscious, or whatever form non-materialism takes, it's solely because of cultural inertia. Well, I have another reason, but we'll get into the psychology of it all in another one. We'll just stick with the cultural inertia for this one. Leftover ideas from religious mythologies and ancient philosophical traditions, which attempted to explain life and existence and emotions and death with primitive, childlike suppositions of things like gods and souls and spiritual realms. We've been taught to assume that those things exist. And when I talk about childlike suppositions of things like gods and souls, that's the idea of agency, and we'll talk about that. That'll be a whole lecture, the psychology of agency and why that's such an impetus to still believe that there's something out there, a person-like entity that's behind everything. maybe an appreciation of the love of a spouse and your children and friends will make us realize that this existence, which may well be the only one that is really real, can be just as transcendent and inspiring all by itself as some mythical realm, especially when we exercise our natural human empathy and downplay our negative tendencies and connect with other humans on the planet. Life can be a heaven, a real heaven. Maybe we'll be able to jettison this unfounded assumption that there must be something more. Couple that appreciation for the wonders of this life, the one we all know for certain, at least we do have this one, with a modern education showing that all spiritual claims are utterly baseless and just old ideas, that authoritative speculations of some philosophers and self-styled New Age gurus and religious authorities, and maybe this spiritual assumption will fade away like other old primitive explanations of how the world works. End religion and spiritual scamming now. So that's it for this little episode. If you like what you see, hey, jump on Patreon. There's a link on my YouTube channel there. Check out my books. There's an Amazon link. Click on that subscribe button. Support this work any way you can. I'm not done with it. I just got this thing up and running about a year ago, almost 20 episodes going, and really happy, really pleased with it. So, adios. See you next time.